Welcome to From Betrayal to Breakthrough, and here is a mini dose of Dr. Debi where I'm sharing tips, suggestions, strategies, and sometimes just motivation to have you move past your betrayal once and for all. Hi there. So, I'm always trying to bring you different topics that you'll find valuable, and as it relates to healing from betrayal. If you know my story, you know I've been through it and I'm out the other side and I can live to tell. And you may know me as the founder and CEO of the PBT Institute, but what I don't talk about very often is just would be other aspects of my life. And one of the biggest roles I have is that of being a mom. And if you're a parent, this is something that may really resonate with you because there are so many things we do. And as we're trying to heal, we're trying to be there in the ways that our kids need us, or be there in the way that work needs us, or elderly parents, or whatever we have going on. But there's so much to this, and I just thought, let me just come to you today, sharing whatever insights I can that can help you navigate this very tricky path. So I've done other episodes where I talk about when I was moving through my own betrayal, how really I said to the kids, and I have 4 kids and they all have amazing partners now, but I remember saying to them, I have no idea how I'm going to heal from this, but I love you dearly and I will figure it out. And you're seeing me crash, you will see me rise. That's all I knew. And I knew they were looking at me like, how's she going to do this? Right? They had no idea, but they were watching. And in them watching me, I knew I had a really important role. Yes, I had to heal and figure this out, but I also was setting an example. And I wanted them to see an example of strength. I wanted them to see an example of authenticity. I wanted them to see an example of raw, real what happens, but I didn't want to share the details. Some of the details, they didn't need to know that, but they needed to know, okay, mom's going through something really big right here. Let's see how she shows up. And it's so interesting because, if you have children, you have more than one child, they're so different, right? And I have 4 kids that couldn't be more different than one another. 2 boys, 2 girls. The boys are totally different. The girls are totally different. All 4 of them together, they're totally different. And it was an interesting time because they each needed me in their own way. And I did my best to show up in the way that they needed. Some needed to talk more often. Some needed just to know I was, working through it and okay. And it was one of these things where I didn't know exactly what I was doing, but intuitively I said, honesty has to win. It's got to be, if you don't know what you're doing, be honest. If you don't know what you're doing, be authentic. If you don't know what you're doing, express love. That's got to be okay. If the other stuff doesn't make any kind of sense, that always does. And now here it is, years later, and I see the results of this. And it's interesting because now here we are, a completely rebuilt family, totally new. Those of you who know my story, I married my husband again as 2 completely transformed people. I would never have done that if he didn't completely transform, and me too. But when I say, and you may have heard me say, betrayal is a full-on reckoning. It is. It's a reckoning of the old you. It's a reckoning of the old betrayer. It's a reckoning of the old relationship. And because of that, you get to birth, at the very least, an entirely new you. If the other person is ready, willing, able to transform themselves too, well, they become an entirely new them. And then you get to decide if you want to create a new version of the relationship. What I see so often is people are so afraid of that death and destruction of the old, but that's the only way you birth the new. And so in my experience, it was that was the deal breaker. And I was, okay, here I am. I'm on my own right now. And I just have to really take care of these kids and show them what's right. And in the best way I could. And I learned that if I don't have the capacity, I can't possibly be there for them in the way they need. So it was such and as a parent, it's like, how do you manage all the things in your busy life? If you, years ago, I used to create for clients like a pie chart, and I used to have them block out, okay, 100% is all you have in this pie chart. How much of it, and I invite everybody to do this, how much of it is dedicated to your work, to errands, to your kids, to self-care, right? When you map it all out and you put it all in this pie chart, what percentage do you have for you and your own healing and your own wellness and your own all of it? And usually we have very little for our own wellness, self-care, healing, all of it. And I remember thinking to myself that I need to just carve out a little time for my own healing and my own self-care. Again, having no idea how I was going to do this. And especially when I entered into the PhD program, now here I am, I'm working, I have all these kids. We had 6 dogs at the time. I'm like, how am I taking on a PhD? But in that time, in that carving out that time, well, those of you who know my story, my entire life changed, because then the 3 discoveries happened, PBT happened, the 5 stages happened, and then sort of the rest is history. But the kids, looking at the kids now, so here it is, years later, and I see them all having benefited from this experience. Now, right here, you're like, she lost me, benefited. What the heck are you talking about? Yeah, benefited. Because I think what we do so often as parents is we're so busy shielding our kids from hard times. And I get it, we don't want them going through anything hard. But when you think about your life, how did you learn your most valuable lessons? I mean, sure, many of them could have been learned from the great things that happened. But I'm sure if you really look, you'll find that some of your greatest lessons were learned from you crashing. Something happened, it didn't go well, you crashed, you picked yourself up, and you were like, okay, not doing that again. Or I really learned this lesson because of this. And I think in us trying to come off a certain way to our kids, it really prevents them from seeing the reality. And here's the thing too, and I really believe every parent knows what's best for their own kids. But we have so many people who come into the PBT Institute and they say, no, we don't want our kids to know. Totally your own decision. I respect whatever it is that you're going to do. But I will tell you, kids are very smart. So if they're seeing that no one is saying anything, but meanwhile, it's the most strained, uncomfortable, awkward scenario that your kids are growing up in, or let's just say, mom was betrayed and now mom just is barely functioning and the kids have no idea why, they're left to their own conclusion. And very often they think it's because of them. So, and I get, everybody has a reason why they don't want to be honest with their kids or share with their kids or burden their kids. And what I found, and again, I can only speak from my own experience, your kids are stronger than you think. And your kids are more resilient than you think. And by having your kids, and the ages and stages where it may be better to share something with them. By sharing something with your kids, again, you're not throwing your partner under the bus. And this is something that both of you have to decide upon and agree to. But what if they really see, wow, I see what it looks like when a relationship goes completely sideways. And I see what happens when you grow apart. And I see what happens when things are unaddressed. And then I see what happens when you both are willing to do such intense work because of the desire to bring a family back together or bring a couple back together, or the love you have, or forgiveness or friendship or whatever that becomes a priority. These are all things that kids, they see. And what do you want to show? Again, I'm not suggesting it should be one way or the other. I can only speak from my experience and from our coaches and practitioners within PBT. They've done it every which way. But what I've seen too is I think so often we don't count on, or we don't, of course, we don't want to put a burden on our kids. That's not what this is about. But if they're able to see humanness, if they're able to see struggle and then resilience and then transformation, what did they learn from that experience? It was a really scary thing for my kids to see me go through this and to see my husband go through his crash and burn. And nothing wakes you up faster than losing the only people that mean anything to you. So I think that's why he made the transformation as quickly and as profoundly as he did. But for kids to see what really matters from both parties could be a really good thing. And of course, we're always, I know for me as a mom, it's like, uh-oh, am I really screwing this up? Am I making the hugest mistake? What's going to come of this? I'll know later, as they're older. Well, now they are older. And that's why I want to share this, because I see how resilient kids are and how they've made decisions based on what they've seen. Now, I'm not saying it wasn't a ton of work to get them to realize this was something that happened in my experience. And that doesn't mean that this is what goes on in every relationship. And this doesn't mean that they're destined to go through the same thing. And those of you who've listened to a very early episode, you've heard me talk about how, and this depends on your spiritual belief. Again, I'm not suggesting one way or the other, but we come to this world with different things that we're here to do. And what I remember seeing an intuitive who's since become a friend, and my meeting with her, I didn't even sit down, and she didn't even know me from anything. And she goes, "Oh my gosh, how you two planned this." I was like, "What did you just say?" And she said, "Yeah, he needed to crash and burn so he can become the husband, father, friend he's supposed to be. And you went through this, you chose this, so you can crash and burn and then heal and come from this deep place of knowing you're going to have all these books and an institute and this following around betrayal." And I was so angry. I was like, "You're crazy." And I didn't necessarily storm out of her office, but I was like, "She's just nuts. What am I doing here?" Well, who knows? You can look at it every which way. Did I create this because there was a seed planted? Was this why I'm here? I don't know. All I know is it didn't feel right for me just to be the recipient of betrayal. And it was my husband and my family as well. So that just didn't feel right. And I've trained myself over time, and I think I've trained my kids in this way too, where I would so much rather try something and fail at it. It's never fail, feedback, right? Than wonder what could have been. Like when an opportunity comes up. Now, if there's something that totally doesn't feel like a fit for me, it's not at all something that I question. But if something feels like when the idea of the PBT Institute showed up, for me, I picture, if I really want to do it, but I don't know how, I would so much rather try all these different things and then it's like, oh, that didn't work out, then wonder what it would have been like to do this. And if I'm not sure, I imagine these two scenarios, and I probably shared this in the past, but one scenario is I imagine my amazing idea floating in a thought bubble above my head, and then someone else looking at it saying, "Ooh, that's a really good idea." And then they take it. It's like, "Oh, that was my idea." And then the other thing, if that doesn't get me, I picture sitting the kids down and saying, "That great idea I had?" And they're like, "Yeah, it's too hard. It was too hard." And they look at me like, "What? It was too hard? That's all you got, Mom?" And if one doesn't get me, that one usually does. And so one of the things I've trained myself to do, as I said, is push through something if it feels like it's something I'm supposed to do, because I know my kids are watching. This just reminds me of years and years and years ago. I remember being part of this group where it was moms who were social media influencers. So this was back in the day. And I get a phone call. I get a phone call from the head of this, and they were doing this, they were planning this half marathon in Disney. And it was a Disney half marathon. Now, I had run in the past, but I certainly wasn't like a marathon runner, half marathon runner. And I remember being asked, and I took this call, it was on speakerphone, and she said, Debbie, we love, what you're doing and all that you're sharing. Would you be open to, what do you think about running or an all expense paid trip to Disney? And I was like, well, that sounds great. And we take care of all of it. You just have to run the Disney Princess Half Marathon. And with that, because I remember one of my daughters was in the room, and I was like, okay. And so I said yes. And then I hung up the phone, and I was like, what the heck did I just do? So what did I do? I looked up, how do you train for a half marathon in 6 weeks? And I printed out a calendar and chopped off the first part of it because I didn't have enough time. And I mean, this is truly how I trained. I didn't train outside, but I had a treadmill, and I rewarded myself after every run with a big peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Listen, laugh if you will, but that's what I did. And I was going to have this peanut butter and jelly sandwich and play my favorite songs during this run. And that was how I trained for this. Well, so I get this all expense paid trip, and I'm questioning myself the whole way, but I had never done anything like this, but I knew there was a huge lesson here. Like I told my kids, if an opportunity that seems fun and exciting and you'll grow shows up, do it, take it. And so here I am now. I go to Disney, and this is way before my betrayal. And so my husband goes and he takes me ahead. Did I have 4 kids at the time? I think I did. So he took them, and I never ran in a race before. I had no idea, a half marathon. This was totally new to me. So I just acted like I was on fire. And I remember one of the first miles, it was a 6-minute mile. And it was because they have these markers and they show you. And I remember at one point running and moving aside because I heard breathing, and I was like, oh my gosh, this person really is trying to pass me. The breathing was so heavy, it was me. And I really had no sense of pacing at all. I just figured I'm going to run like I'm on fire. And it was so interesting because that's exactly what I did the whole time. And it was just such an interesting experience. People were jumping off the line because they were taking pictures with Disney characters. People were dressed up in tiaras and tutus. Like, this was a whole other thing. Anyway, my timing was amazing, but I was sore for days, and that was the end of it. That was the end of the running, the running career. But it was always in my mind, what example am I setting? And the kids are watching. And I use this not even when I know they're watching, but when I think they're not, because I know I always want to, I never want to have that imposter syndrome. And this is something so many of us deal with in business, but I move that to motherhood and parenthood as well. I don't want to be an imposter in any way. So when the kids are asking me something, I don't want to say one thing and I'm doing something else. I don't want to, not be completely and totally authentic, because then I always have to think about what I'm saying, and I don't have the capacity to remember, what did I say? Make sure you say that again, or make sure. No, if you're not honest, it takes a tremendous amount of work to keep up with your own stuff that you said. So it just makes life, for me personally, a lot easier by living by some very simple rules. If it's going to hurt someone, don't do it. Be honest. Be as authentic as you can. If you screw up, own it and say sorry, and teach the best way you can, and lead by example. I mean, period. And I you never know how that's going to go down, but coming from this place now of having all grown children, they're all in their 20s. I see that, for me anyway, it worked. It worked. These are great humans that have amazing relationships, that look for each other, that celebrate each other, that want to spend time with each other, having nothing to do with me, that really are good humans and really good people. And it's all because of the work they've done. But if you're unsure as a parent, how are you showing up? Are you being honest? Are you being authentic? Are you leading by example? Are you screwing up and owning it and saying sorry? If I tell you how many times I said to my kids, I love you more than anything, I could be making the most horrific mistakes, but I'm certainly not doing it intentionally. Let me know if I am, and let me clean it up. And there is nothing any of you could say or do that could ever make me not love you. So be honest with me. And they are. And I think there's this level of trust that's been built. And this is really important too, because through betrayal, remember, trust is shattered. And if you have kids, they need that rock of trust. So you may be representing both parents, and that's okay. Be that rock. But that doesn't mean you can't be vulnerable. You can't be honest. They can't see that you're having a rough day. Honesty means all of it. All of it. And what I see too is, if you're trying to come across so perfectly, kids feel they can never measure up. And I remember this way back when the kids were super little and in like nursery school. And I would go to, parent teacher night or whatever, and you'd see in the hallways the most these perfectly beautiful pictures. And I'm thinking, that mom stayed up all night to do that. My kids had the glue dripping down. Like, they never had that, because it wasn't about, if it was so perfect and if it wasn't coming from them, how do they ever build up their confidence? How do they ever build up their self-esteem? What example am I showing? And I remember also when I was a functional diagnostic nutritionist doing stress testing for a lot of moms who on the outside looked perfect. They had it all together. They were the ones bringing in those perfect cupcakes, but I did their lab tests and I know they were a mess. And I know they had completely given up any aspect of self just to come off so perfectly. So, I guess what I'm really saying here is, there is something so beautiful about being authentically you. You're not burdening your kids. That's not what this is about. You're not laying it all on them. Like, here are all my struggles. Do something with this. But you're being real. And by being real, maybe it is, hey, this is the hardest thing I've ever been through. It has nothing to do with you. So if I'm not showing up the way you need, I love you and I'm doing my best, and just let me know. I'll do the best I can when I can. And there's something about honesty that rebuilds trust in your kids, because it's been shattered. And if you think they don't know you're struggling, they do. So of course, again, whatever you feel is right and best, but I'm all for honesty. I really am. And I feel like it's such a beautiful way for your kids to see who you are, what you are, as you're recreating you. You hear me say it about betrayal all the time. It is deliberate. It's intentional. You're taking all the parts you love. You're leaving behind everything that no longer serves. And what about if this new version of you is so lovingly honest and authentic and real, right? Your kids love you. They love you. And again, you're not throwing your partner under the bus. You're not shaming or blaming, but you're taking full and complete responsibility for you and leading by example. So I hope this resonates, and I hope you see that by doing the best you can and coming from a place of love and coming from a place of authenticity, that's going to show up. It's going to make a mark. And I'm, like I said, I see what it's done. So I'm sharing what was, I'm sharing the process, And now being on the other side of it, I see it was such tremendous work, but having this beautiful new family, same people, but not the same people, where we're making up for lost time and celebrating each other and having so much fun and loving so deeply and so fully and so completely is worth all of it. So as you've heard me say, that's trauma well served. So I hope this helps. Take from it what you will. Do the best you can, of course, within the PBT Institute. That's all we do all day long, is help you become your physical, mental, emotional best, get you to stage 5 so you could show up as authentically, as fully, as beautifully as you're meant to. I hope that helps. I'll see you next time. You need the right tools, support, and the right community to move through the 5 stages from betrayal to breakthrough. And we have all that within the PBT Institute. So join us at the PBT, as in post-betrayal transformation, thepbtinstitute.com. There's a version of you who's so confident, healthy, peaceful, and happy on the other end of your healing. And we can't wait to help you get there. We got you. Thanks for listening. And here's to your breakthrough.